reason why we're pushing so hard on this from the Facebook perspective is that we really see mobile as the future. If we look at some growth numbers, just 3 months ago in April, Zuck got on stage at F8 and announced that in 3 years, Facebook reached 100 million mobile users. So today I had an update to that number. We are now over 150 million users for Facebook Mobile. And that number is continuing to grow.
Wow.
What's also really exciting, yeah, I mean, this is, for us, it's a great milestone.
So that's an amazing amount of acceleration, so 100 to 150 million. And is that acceleration growing? Or is it?
It's an accelerating growth, and the reason why is because mobile is fast becoming our growth lever. If you look at where Facebook is, back in April, now it's 400 million users. As we begin to think about how we continue to expand Facebook and the engagement of Facebook overseas, outside the US, you're starting to go into geographies where phones are the predominant way that you connect to the world, that you connect to the internet, not PC computers. So we're all about, on the mobile side, thinking about how we can leverage mobile as a way to actually get users aware of and engaged with social services on Facebook. And we're beginning to see that. So just last week, we launched with a major program with Airtel in India, one of the major carriers in India. And through a really tight co-marketing partnership, we are now reaching out to all 110 million of Airtel subscriber base. And this is just sort of an example of how you can really have a huge impact on a large population if you really think about leading with mobile first.
Okay. And I do want to start going into questions at the end of this talk, so please get ready with your questions for Erick. I'm sure there's a lot of you with them. We'll have a microphone. Garrett is back there, so stick up your hand eventually, and he'll come back with a microphone. We talked about how mobile is different from the web in some ways, and so we talked about the advantages because you do have, in some ways, more personalization of the phone. You've got it on you all the time. You're on the go, and so there's certain things that you can do with these social tools and mobile. But then there's certain fragmentations that are frustrating too, right? I mean, the iPhone probably has 1% of the market if you're being generous of the wider phone market. So you've got to be a cross-phone platform. Can we talk about what you need to do? What are the steps to be truly working at the phone level to get this stuff across?
Yeah, I mean, there's a baseline amount of functionality today that you can tap into just by using the mobile web. And what we're seeing increasingly so is that more and more platforms are adopting common standards and common technologies in the mobile web space. The WebKit browser is already baked into Android, into the iPhone, into the Palm devices, and RIM recently announced that they're going to be using WebKit as well. That is really good news for all of us who are trying to build across an increasingly diverse landscape for mobile platforms. But in addition to that, my firm belief is that there is still years before we can actually say, all right, you know what, we can go mobile web only and forego all the client apps. And the reason why is there's just still a lot of additional advantages that you get by leveraging specific native capabilities and devices. And we're seeing that with some of the leading platforms like with iPhone and with Android. The kinds of integration that you can get with underlying phone hardware, like the camera, for instance, background processing. So you can do uploads to Facebook and still do something else at the same time without just waiting for it to actually complete. Those kinds of capabilities are still made available only if you've got this sort of native connectivity.
Okay, so given that limitation, you have to use native to a certain extent, and it is fragmented. What are the applications that you could see taking off by accessing these tools that you're going to be providing over, what is it, the next 6 months? That's the time frame we're talking about, right?
It's an ongoing rollout.
Okay,
right. So
what are some of the applications that you can conceive of or thought about, Erick, that should be built to take advantage of this?
Yeah, so let's take a couple of let's take one example which probably everyone here has already heard of, at least at this point. Anyone in the mobile space has heard this classic, right? It's the example of location-based services. You're hungry, it's noontime.
Walking by Starbucks.
You're walking by Starbucks, exactly. See, everyone's heard this. And your phone pings you because it knows you're near the Starbucks because you've got a GPS chip on your phone. And oh, hey, it offers you a coupon for 20% off Frappuccino, right? Common story. Who here's actually done that on their phone today? All right, so for folks who can't see, 0 hands went up in the room. Part of the reason for that is because it feels like spam. There isn't any contextual relevancy to that ping besides the simple fact that you just happen to be near Starbucks, and it happens to be noontime. For someone like me, if I got that kind of a ping on my phone at noontime, I would turn that app off. However, if you can actually layer on top of that some kind of social intelligence, some kind of awareness that makes it relevant for me, not just the fact that I'm near a Starbucks, but let's just say for a moment that 30 of my friends really love this new pumpkin-flavored Frappuccino that they launched in like the Halloween time frame, and we're raving about it on Yelp and on Facebook and on whatever other services. And I get that ping, but it's actually socially informed. All of a sudden, that kind of a notification system becomes much more interesting to me. Then, if on top of that, the same notification can say, oh, hey, by the way, 2 of your really good friends just happen to be in that Starbucks, you should pop in and say hi. Now, all of a sudden, I've got a really interesting use case. And for someone like me, I'm not going to turn that app off anymore, right? And that's the kind of future that we think we can help enable by making this whole mobile platform available via Facebook.
Right, and with 150 million people using Facebook, you can start generating that sort of information in ways that other players can't, right?
Yeah, and if you think about it, it's not just about mobile when you're talking about that kind of data. So back in April, we announced a couple of new products as part of this Open Graph, one of which many of you have seen is this like button. It's just a simple component, 1 line of code that you drop into any web page, and users can like content. You can like a business, you can like a movie, you can like a book, and all of that data is part of this Open Graph. It's actually universally available to anyone who wants access to that.
We have it on VentureBeat.
You have it on VentureBeat.
Exactly.
And in fact, yesterday I actually liked VentureBeat using that plugin. So
nice.
Just one more user fee. But here's what's so interesting. It's not the 150 million users that are generating that content of recommendations, of personal affiliations, of personal preferences. It's the nearly 500 million users that are across Facebook that are generating that kind of content. That's what's so important. That's what's so compelling. And we feel that mobile is going to be a really great consumer of that recommendation data.
Now, on the Starbucks example, you rightly said we've heard that anecdote for the last 3 years, right? You're standing in line at Starbucks. And when do you think that's going to actually happen?
Well, the beauty of this is that it can happen today.
So it can actually happen today. So Erick's the guy who's going to actually make that anecdote come true.
We're going to make the platform that allows anyone here to make that vision come true. Because the beauty of this is that that's just one example. Right? I'm just picking on a classic location-based service example which hasn't really come to fruition. You can think of all sorts of other examples around events, around purchasing behavior, around product recommendations. You're standing in a store and you're trying to figure out a gift for your dad's birthday. How often has anyone actually come into this problem of like trying to buy a gift for someone who has everything, right? Probably a bunch of people in this room, probably a bunch of your friends. How about you're standing in some store and you actually just ping the people on your phone, your network for recommendations, and within the span of a few minutes, you get your responses. That's the kind of experiences that we hope we can help enable, but from the Facebook perspective, providing you the tools to do so.
You worked at Google for a while on the Nexus One, so you're very familiar with what Google is doing, its cultural approach to mobile. And they are apparently building out a social network. And if you're looking at players who are competitive to Facebook and providing a sort of platform tools as opposed to an application, right? So you're talking now about something very significant that you're doing on the platform level. Google is probably one of the biggest competitors, right? So Apple obviously is a little more closed, a little more vertical. They're large, but how big of a jump on Google do you have? I mean, is it a year? Is it 2 years? I mean, can you talk a little bit about? Maybe that's an unfair question because it's hard to quantify whether Google will ever actually get a social network that is successful to get it. But let's talk about what you can do with that jump that you have, the lead time before the next player comes along to offer something similar. I don't even know who that would be. Who is the closest? I mean, you were at Facebook, at Google. Who would be the closest to be able to provide such a competing platform?
Yeah, I like how you're trying to stir up some juicy gossip here. Look,
It's an honest question.
Yeah, it is. And in all honesty, from the Facebook perspective, we literally just focus on how we evolve our own roadmap. I mean, there's